Hello everyone, Gears here, and we're back in YawCraft for 1.10.2 Minecraft, and this is a follow-up video to the Tinkers vid that I uploaded. There were some items that I meant to cover but didn't get a chance to, even though that particular video ran over 20 minutes long. It's a very in-depth mod, Tinker's Construct, a lot to go over, a lot to cover. But it's not my goal to cover 100% of the mod. It's definitely one of those. It's best discovered on your own. I just wanted to share some of my favorite recipes, talk a little bit about the setups, and with that said, though, there are a couple of things that I did want to cover but didn't get a chance to. One of my favorite recipes that I didn't cover in the last video is the rapier. I made mine out of Manulin, and I think it's one of my better recipes. I like the rapier, especially in 1.10 Minecraft, because the rapier supports, it basically supports spam clicking, which due to the combat update you really can't do anymore with other swords. In fact, its quick strike ability, demands that you use it that way. And if your recipe is solid, you could inflict some serious damage to your opponents. Again, I've made mine out of Manulin, that is the blade and the tool handle. I have made the crossguard out of copper so I can get extra XP. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. I've tricked this sword out pretty well, I think. The cold-blooded ability increases the damage done to opponents as long as you have full health. Now, because of the range that you have to be in when using the sword, that is kind of hard to maintain unless you have added lifesteal. And I've got 2 instances of necrotic on here. So as long as I keep spam clicking the sword, for every strike I do, I steal my opponent's health and add it to my own. So not only does this sword do maximum damage, all the damage that I inflict helps me keep doing max damage, literally. The other ability that the Manulin toolbar adds is Insatiable. During combat, you deal more and more damage, but also consume more durability. That can be problematic, of course, unless you also have Mending on here, and the Mending is fueled by experience, which you get from killing mobs, plus you get more of because you've got the copper crossguard. So as you can see, this is a very good recipe. I think a very strong sword. As a matter of fact, I've even increased the damage and stats by adding a diamond, which increases durability. It also improves some other stats, including damage, and I've added quartz for even more damage. And of course, looting for more drops. But I've got plans for this particular design. I do intend for my up-and-coming battle with the Wither to make another one of these swords. It'll most likely be a Manulin blade as well. Perhaps the Manulin tool handle as well. But some of these parts are going to change. One of them is going to become, perhaps the crossguard will be silver, because silver adds a smite ability. And I'm also going to add even more smite using, I believe it's the consecrated soil that you can make in Tinkers. So I've got plans to build a deluxe sword very similar to this one that's meant to fight the Wither. I think smite does more damage to the Wither than sharpness. So not only can you build a strong sword that'll see you through most of the game, you can build custom swords that that is specific to one fight. I do believe if I get a strong sword with a lot of smite and necrotic on it, That should keep me going against the Wither in the heat of combat. You know, with the I don't have another star of my own yet, so I haven't been fortunate enough to get one through the chance cubes. So I can't craft a Wither pet to protect me from the Wither, but um, with the right with the regen pet, I think, and the sword that I described, the one outfitted with smite and necrotic, I should last a long time in that fight. So I may let you know how that one goes. Anyway, that's my favorite sword recipe in the game. The other thing I wanted to cover was your Tinker's setup. Now, with all of the various stations that you use in Tinker's Construct, layout does kind of matter. I mean, you wouldn't think so initially when you open the UI, because as long as you have all the Tinker's devices next to each other, if you open the UI, you have a tabbed access to all of the stations, which is great. I mean, which means you can work within the stations without having to pop out and pop in the UI all the time. But there's some additional things that are going on that you may not be aware. Take, for instance, the button UI here that pulls in the part crafter that pulls your patterns from the chest. If the part builder is not next to the pattern chest, you won't have this UI. It will literally appear elsewhere. If you, like, say, place it here, you can still access it through the tab menu, but notice there is no instant click. It's the same. It's very similar to the other stations. To be able to access the same chest, to get this interface here, it's pretty much the same story. You have to have that next to it in order to be able to drop your patterns into the chest. So your layout actually matters when you're laying out the into the various stations, as the chest as well. But I keep a chest nearby just so I can access it through the crafting station. Very handy to have. And the crafting station is actually necessary as well, because without that, you don't have the tabbed UI up top. So that plays a role. So for ease of use, definitely mind how you lay out your parts and stations. The final thing I wanted to cover was the smeltery. Somebody asked me to go into a little bit more in depth about it. They noticed that I had mine tricked out just a little, but not really. It's still your standard smeltery, just a couple of extra bells and whistles to make life a little bit easier. The first of which is I have an unused drain here on this side, and the only reason I have this drain here is so I can easily take a bucket and right-click lava inside the tank or the smeltery itself. I don't mean the tank. That's actually a separate fluid inventory. I mean in the actual internal part of the smeltery. Now, for those unaware, the reason why you'd want to do this is you can make, if you don't have the means to mine it, you can make obsidian in your smeltery. That's how I got the obsidian sharpening kits early game. I just had, I made myself a tank and was able to collect enough lava that I made a number of sharpening kits for my tools. But yeah, just right-clicking one bucket of water, one bucket of lava will net you one block of molten obsidian, which all you need to do is cast that in a casting basin, and you'll have your block that you don't need to mine. It's in an inventory. So, one of the other things I wanted to note was, as you can see in the front, I do have a window. Now, a lot of people will think that's decor, and yeah, I suppose it looks kind of cool, especially with liquid metals inside. But this actually serves a function. Regardless of how tall you make your smeltery, Side note, I like to make my smelteries 3 by 3 by 8 minimum. And the reason for being is I like to be able to shift click a full stack of materials into the smeltery, and that's the minimum size needed to make that happen. It's not necessary, that's just a personal preference. But regarding the glass, you want to have at least one glass, I think, at the bottom of your smeltery. The reason for being is if you mobs, that is, can spawn inside the smeltery, which the remains and blood are relatively easy to clear out, but it's a nuisance, honestly. So if you include a glass, you can light with a torch very easily, light the interior, and it not affect functionality at all. It'll just prevent mobs from spawning. It's just a convenience feature. Now, another thing you may notice is I've got mine like fully enclosed with a border that I made from chisel. That is nothing but decorative. It doesn't serve a function whatsoever. You see, to get a working smeltery, you only need the blocks that maintain the internal structure, as depicted in this illustration here. As long as the internal space is completed on all sides by blocks, it's a functioning smeltery. You see, the border portion, the corner portions are unnecessary. You can include those if you've got the smeltery bricks for it, and it's just an issue of decor. You can certainly use Tinker's bricks on the ends, and it won't affect a thing. When I first started building mine, I did not have a lot of resources, but I did mine up a bunch of basalt, so I turned those into bricks, which looks not too dissimilar, and just turned those into border pieces, as you can see here. I don't have a torch at the bottom for lighting, if you've noticed, because I included glass all the way up and included 2 lanterns, which light the internal space just as well. But if you have a smaller smeltery and you can make do without this block, glowstone works as well. It's just something needed to prevent spawning inside. One of the other things I did was I increased the capabilities of my lava tank here. The seared tank, it can only hold 4 buckets of lava, which lasts a decent amount of time. But I used an Ender IO tank because it has the ability on its own without pipes to pull and push liquids. I made myself a reinforced drum which holds 4 million, and I used an immersive engineering pump to collect a bunch of lava from the nether. So, because of the transfer capabilities of this fluid tank, which it on its own holds a decent amount, it holds about 16 buckets. But because it can pull and push liquids, I was able to use this drum to extend the fluid capacity of my smeltery significantly. I probably will, even without refilling this drum, I probably will never run out of lava to run the smeltery with. The other thing I did was I included a hopper to feed into the smeltery interface. You see, each interface will each block will only hold one item, one either part to melt down or an ore. So that's the other reason I wanted it so large, so I can begin processing a bunch of metals. For those who are unaware, the smeltery is not just for crafting metal tool parts for your tools. It's also for doubling your ores. The hopper will feed into that. I could just shift click a bunch of ores into this dropper. I use this dropper. It's actually better to use a chest here because the chest obviously is way better. But I use this dropper because normally you need a space above, an empty space, to be able to open a chest. You can put a half block or stair above a chest and it'll open. But I decided to use this. It doesn't need a space above to be opened. I could use a full block, which makes it look better. And all this is just an inventory to feed into the hopper, nothing more. That's the only reason I used it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have used anything at all. The other thing that I tricked out my smeltery with is this redstone clock. The faucets respond to redstone pulses, so as long as you have this going and you have ores inside, it will dispense the liquid metals in the appropriate casts. I have ingot casts here, obviously, and this was before I migrated to Ender.io. This was what I used to double my ores, and it worked very efficiently. The tables and casting basin are hooked up to this chest via vanilla Minecraft hoppers, and once the item is done crafting, whether it be ingots or a tool part, it feeds into this chest. Well, that's all I really wanted to add to my Tinkers video. Hope it wasn't too long-winded. Everyone, thank you for your time. If you have any advice for me on how to improve my setup, or if you have any questions regarding mine, please let me know. Contact me via Discord, and everyone, take care.